Yo, 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 people and patrons of the night. It is your host, BD, and welcome to the Horror Tavern. Make sure to grab a drink, make sure to take a seat, and enjoy, once again, the Horror Tavern, where we explore the limitless cavern that is the horror genre. So without further ado, I wanted to make a video about some of the scariest moments that I've ever read in horror books. Now, this is not a conclusive scariest moment. This series I announced on my channel and my community post, and it's basically going to be like volumes to it. I'm going to update and post videos about the scariest moments I read in books. The more I keep reading, I'm on a reading journey. I am an avid horror reader. I read strictly horror, so I'm looking for stuff that's going to scare me. And that's the main reason why I watch horror, as the main reason why I read horror, is because at the end of the day, I want to get scared. I care about the scary stuff. I care about the horrifying stuff. I care about everything that's dark and disturbing. If it's a good story, if it's got some fun elements, if it's got other stuff, yeah, that's cool. That's kind of secondary to me. I'm reading horror to get scared and read some disturbing stuff that breaks the norm of what people mostly experience in every other genre of content. So that's why I do what I do. So these four moments are ones that are prominent to me. I have some other scariest moments in horror books that I can talk about in later installments of these videos. But for the first one, I wanted to pick four books that I thought each had some banger, scary / disturbing moments in them. This is not going to be ranked. It's not going to be in order. I'm just going to be going how I feel in terms of how I want to list the four books. But the last one in here, I think would genuinely freak out a lot of people. So without further ado, let's get into it. Just as a warning, spoilers ahead, because I am talking about the scariest moments in these books. Oh, Jesus. The scariest moment is me losing my breath and getting into a coughing spree. Jeez. Scariest moments in books. Spoilers. If you've not read these books, you may want to tread carefully in this video. But if you don't care, if you just care about understanding some of the scariest stuff that you can get in books and maybe use this as a sort of promotion or informative thing, feel free to keep watching and hit that subscribe button and hit that like button. We're close to 300 subscribers. I want to hit that goal. And of course, helping out, boosting me up in the algorithm, gets my content out there, my videos out there, so more of you guys can enjoy. And it's a good way to let me know how interactive you guys are with the videos, what you like, what you want to see. So let's get into the scariest moments that I've read in horror books, starting with number one. Now, the first story I want to talk about is one of the best horror short stories that I've ever read in my entire life, as of right now. A perfect horror short story that I did make a video on before, and that is none other than The Boogeyman by Stephen King from Night Shift. This is a very creepy, very eerie, very well done short story. It's short, but it's extremely well done, well paced, has a lot of good material in there. And I specifically want to talk about the climax. So for context, just a little bit of context, the story revolves around this guy who basically admits to a therapist that he ended up killing all of his little children. However, the truth of the matter is that police don't really know what happened, and that he wasn't actually the one who killed his children. It was actually the boogeyman. And he starts going into flashback and talking about each of his kids that got murdered by the boogeyman and all of the horrific things involving it. And it slowly keeps building up and escalating from going to just creepy to eerie to straight outright scary. And the moment I want to talk about is the climax scene. So what ends up happening is that with, I think, his third or last child, he basically is at his breaking point by this time because he knows that this creature is basically after his kids for some reason, tormenting him and his family, targeting him. And one night, his kids start screaming that the boogeyman is there about to get him. And as soon as he runs into the room, he swears to God that he sees some dark thing slither into the closet. And from that point on, that's his breaking point. He decides to move out of that house that claimed the lives of all of his previous children and move into a new one that had much less closets, much more open space just to spot things. However, one night he hears his kid start screaming. And in the climax, he says that how much he loves this kid because by this point he's racing towards his kid's bedroom, and he starts thinking about all the different creepy things and realizations that he comes to when they move into this new house. And that's that the boogeyman has stalked him and followed him to this new location. He talks about hearing, one day all the doors in the house were busting open as if it's a poltergeist fest. Like all these doors just fly open. He says that he hears some large things slithering around the house, leaving slimy entrails, leaving mud and dirt all over the floors. And he hears the, not like this, but like the scraping and pattering of the claws that is gripping across the ground. And he just hears this like spider-like, demon-like entity racing around the house. He starts freaking out. He starts getting paranoid and thinking he can feel its presence. He can imagine this thing all over just the streets trying to hunt down him and his family. And when it does arrive, it is a major force to be reckoned with. And he opens up the door to his kid's bedroom. And what does he see? He describes this demonic, skinny creature that's slimy, this entity, tall, lanky. It has a scarecrow head as described by him, so this very kind of, again, demonic skull-like face. And it is flinging and tearing apart his kid. It's described as a dog having like a chew toy and just flailing it around or throwing it around as if it's a rag doll. This kid, this little toddler, is getting thrown around and gets its neck snapped. It gets mangled by this thing, and he completely freaks out in seeing it. The way this thing is described after all the buildup in the short story about it basically stalking the family, scouring the streets like some all-time next-level entity, trying to hunt down the family, sniffing them out like a bloodhound, and then breaking into the house, leaving slime all over, scattering across the floors with its claws, moving around like a spider, like a demon, and then finding the kid, and he walks in to his kid screaming and sees this thing flailing his baby around as if it's a fucking rag doll and breaks its neck and tears it apart. That is horrifying stuff. That is, the way it is executed is extremely scary. And if you think that's bad, reading the entire short story and getting to that moment, Jesus Christ, man, it was brutal. It was creepy. It combined the boogeyman with the idea of a stalker, with the idea of a serial killer, kind of like with the idea of the Grim Reaper, a demon, all these different things mixed into the identity of the boogeyman. And when you finally see this thing going full on action, the entire story, you see this thing do the aftermath of killing, and then you finally see it in action. You hear how horrifying it is. You see what it's capable of, and you can't help but just get completely freaked out by it. And maybe if you're walking alone throughout your house at night when all the lights are out, you go grab a late night snack, or you're walking back to your bedroom, after reading the story, you may feel a little bit more paranoid. So that's my first pick of the top 4 scariest, not top 4, but prominent 4 scariest scenes that I've read in horror books. Now let's get to number 3. Number 3 revolves around a book that I read, and this book is, again, one that I've talked about multiple times. It's one of my favorite horror books of all time that I've ever read, and coincidentally, it's by someone related to Stephen King. It's by his son, Joe Hill. And this book, many of you may guess, is Nosferatu. The scene that I'm talking about in this question is when Vic McQueen, the main character of the book as a teenager, happens to use her special power of teleportation by crossing her little bike over this kind of dilapidated bridge into other parts of the United States. She happens to end up somewhere, and this place ends up being quite a horrible place to be because she ends up traveling unknowingly to the house of Charlie Manx, the main villain of Nosferatu, the vampire, the villain, the main villain of this book. He has the power to create this world that's manifested from his head into reality, this parallel world called Christmas Land. It's like a parallel dimension, gimmicks off like Christmas and snowmen and all different reindeer and stuff, and it's this giant amusement park, this Christmas amusement park, but it's a giant Christmas amusement park out of hell. And she goes to his house, and when she enters, she sees that the woods are covered entirely in Christmas decorations. There's shining angels, there's ornaments, there's all these different things. It's very eerie when you consider this guy's powers. And she doesn't actually encounter him until she gets to the house and sees that there's a little boy trapped inside of his Rolls-Royce Wraith, where he kidnaps kids and potentially he assumingly sexually assaults and kills them. However, when she gets to this vehicle and she tries helping out the kid, this kid is not quite a kid. This kid, used to be a kid and became something else thanks to Charlie Manx. And that is the fact that this kid turns absolutely corpse white pale, has black, lifeless eyes, has jagged rows of hooked teeth going back all the way from his mouth to his throat like the mouth of a lamprey, has these like almost sharp claw-like hands that as soon as they touch you, they are so cold that they cause instant frostbite, and frostbite burn you. And this kid grabs a hold of Vic McQueen's wrist and holds on to her as she's trying to basically save this kid. This poor teenage girl grabs onto her, starts burning the flesh through frostbite on her hand, and when she manages to pull away, this kid starts screaming and yelling to Charlie Manx that, hey, we found a new victim. It's a pretty little girl. You're gonna like her. And she starts freaking out. And next thing you know, when she runs into Charlie Manx's house and sees how weird and odd it is, she then sees Charlie Manx. And Charlie Manx takes the bicycle that she uses to travel from dimensions and then rolls it out of the portal that would allow her to get back home. So essentially she ends up being stranded at this guy's house, this serial killer supernatural entity's house, with this kid who then starts trying to break the glass of the patio with his head and try to reach in and kill her and grab her and eat her. Meanwhile, Charlie Manx is getting into the house and trying to grab Vic McQueen, and then they just end up burning the house. And she's basically trapped in this burning house, almost being, again, burnt to death, trying to escape the fire. Meanwhile, this demonic little entity of a kid and this horrific supernatural serial killer is all trying to get her at once. She deals with the trinity of threats, and it is so intense, so scary. Just the scene alone of this demonic little kid with black, lifeless eyes, frostbite touch, and again, thousands of hooks for teeth going all the way down from the beginning of his mouth down his throat like the mouth of a lamprey. That is horrifying stuff. And this little Terminator kid coming after you, and this super 6 foot tall, decrepit, old Nosferatu looking man trying to come after you as well. That is terrifying, man. It is horrifying stuff, seeing this poor teenage girl, 18 years old, getting targeted by these entities, and then on top of that, almost being burned alive in the house. Very intense. Her trying to escape is very, very insane. It's literally insane, and it's one of the scariest scenes that I've read in horror books. So yeah, that's one of the reasons I would say read Nosferatu. There's plenty of disturbing, creepy, scary scenes in there, but that one stuck out to me. I was like, holy shit, that was terrifying to imagine being there and imagining her going through that. So that's my pick for number 2 in this video. Number 3 comes from a short story that I read quite recently from one of the worst horror books. In fact, the worst horror book I've ever read, Hark the Herald Angels Scream. I just made a video recently about the best Christmas horror short story I've ever read being from that book. This is not from that. This is from another one. And this story is by Joe R. Lansdale. Joe R. Lansdale is a popular horror author. I have not read his work, but after reading the short story, I'm impressed by him. And it has some of the scariest ghost scenes that I've ever read in my life. And I'm talking about the second floor of the Christmas Hotel. That's the name of the story. It's about this old guy who meets up with one of his friends who's a hotel owner. And they talk about this one party that they had during Christmas at this kind of like hotel in the woods. It's kind of like an inn. And this woman ended up drowning there. This beautiful woman ended up getting drunk and drowning there. And the hotel owner decided to stay one night in this room that was said to be haunted, that everybody seemed to be fleeing from and were terrified by. And the things he sees that night is horrifying. He describes hearing noises in the closet. And then he hears what sounds like a corpse fall from the top of the closet down to the floor. It's just a giant thud. And when the door opens, this drowned, water demon-like woman starts slithering and mucking across the floor and starts going up straight to his bed, crawling, slithering, leaving behind trails of water. And again, if you've ever seen Are You Afraid of the Dark? Water demons, or like, let's say if you've seen Creepshow 1 and you remember the end of Something to Tide You Over, that type of water demon ghost, that's what the story has. It has this water demon type of lady. She's got seaweed in her hair. She's got this very liquidy melted skin. She's got white pupilless eyes. She's got a mouth gaping open with, rotted teeth and seaweed hanging out, or like water plants hanging out. And she's horrifying, man. The idea of combining this boogeyman-like aspect of her waiting in the closet, watching this guy, and then collapsing to the floor like a dead corpse, and then slithering over to him, and then crawling up on the bed and staring at him with these white pupilless eyes and completely melted, wet skin, all sloppy features, like damn near she's got fish hanging out of her mouth. That's how decrepit and disgusting she looks. Just this rotted, bloated corpse that's walking around in this hotel room. And it is one of the scariest things that I've ever read. The way it's written about her crawling and finding him is horrifying. And then you have the fact that later in the story, it's revisited that him and his friend go to this room on Christmas, this I guess Christmas later down the line, and they go back with this guy. And she does the same stuff, but she does something even worse. She starts becoming violent. She starts doing some poltergeist, paranormal activity shit on top of her horrifying boogeyman slithering shit. It is the scariest ghost stuff I've ever read in adult horror, hands down. It is some of the scariest stuff you can read. It is horrifying. If you love that Are You Afraid of the Dark episode called Water Demons, if you like that segment from Creepshow, if you like similar stuff to that, you're going to like this short story, because the way this lady's written, the way she acts, the way she kills, the way she does things, it is all bone-chilling. It is hands down the scariest ghost stuff that I have ever read. And that then leads to the final pick of this video. So that's 3. So what is 4? 4 is the most disturbing scene I have ever read in horror. Seen in horror, read in horror, period, just in all horror media. It is from Wounds, 6 Stories from the Border of Hell by Nathan Ballingrud. This is one of my favorite short story collections that I've read. It is an amazing short story collection. It's basically a giant dark fantasy book where the author, Nathan Ballingrud, super talented guy, he creates this fantasy world about hell. He makes his own monsters of hell. He makes his own landscape and lore behind hell. You have all these different cool and crazy features. And each story, although they are all interconnected, even though they are all unconnected anthology stories in different time periods and different parts of the world, they all revolve around the same world of hell, except each story deals with a different aspect of hell, different monsters from hell, different lore of hell, and each story slowly gives you bits and pieces of it, and then the final story is like this big crescendo movie event that incorporates a little bit of everything and then gives you, a wrap-up. I really hope he makes a sequel, but that aside, one of the stories in here has the scariest scene I've ever read, and the story is called The Visible Filth. The Visible Filth is about this Louisiana bartender. He lives in Louisiana, always talks about how it's like dirty and cockroach infested, and it's a grimy city. He's kind of like a guy who wants to cheat on his girlfriend. He's not very faithful. He's kind of a piece of shit, but a charming piece of shit nonetheless. And during a barroom fight that happens at his bar, these group of college kids are there, and they witness these guys start beating each other up, and one of the college kids leaves behind a phone. And the bartender decides to take the phone home and then return it maybe the next day, see if that kid comes back. The kid never comes back. But the phone starts getting weird text messages, and I mean really weird text messages. The phone starts getting these text messages from an unknown number saying that they feel there's a presence in the room with them, that they're creeping out, that they're freaked out. And then the bartender starts getting curious, and he starts getting text messages from these college kids, apparently, who start saying weird subliminal threats to him. And he's like, what the fuck is going on? And then they tell him to open up the camera roll. And holy Jesus, what they see in the camera roll is horrifying. Him and his girlfriend. He opens up the camera roll, swipes through a bunch of pictures, sees what looks like a crime scene, a bunch of blood and murder going on. And then one of the pictures is of a dining table. And the dining table has a decapitated head on top of it. And the head is shaven. And the top of the head has a pentagram star-sized hole cut into it. So they peeled off this guy's scalp, described like banana peels, peeled off in a pentagram star off his head, and then they dug out all the remains of this skull and then pulled the eyes out of the socket. So it's just this hollow, decapitated head with this star-shaped opening on top. And the next is a video, and the video is of assumedly this college kid's recording a video and performing a ritual. There's candles, there's this unlegible language that's being spoken to this decapitated head. And as this happens, the most horrifying scene I've ever read in my life is described, where it's described that from the star-shaped hole inside of this decapitated head on the dining table, amongst this ritual, 4 long, lanky, pale fingers emerge from the opening in the head, and let me take off my cap. It emerges out of the head and pulls the head back like this. A hand, a long, demonic, rake-looking hand, 4 abnormally long fingers emerge out of this bloody opening and grab the forehead of this decapitated head and pull it back. And then the kids start screaming and laughing and freaking out. And then the video cuts. And let's just say this plays later into the story, when you find out that this ritual was the birth of some creatures called carrier angels. Now, these creatures, you don't really see what they are, but basically this ritual is to birth them. And the way they're birthed is you have to kill somebody. You can either kill somebody or you can get a living host, infect them some way, somehow. And either a wound has to fester and get infected or has to be cut into the body where these creatures can then be birthed and emerge from them. Horrifying stuff. That is some of the scariest things I've ever read in my life. Absolutely terrifying. And I really don't want to go further with it because I would love for y'all to read that book and read Visible Filth. It is a scary, scary story. But man, that ritual then plays into something that happens to a living character at the end of the book. And then a character does something to that character. And it is disgusting and freaky and weird. And it is the scariest thing I've ever read in my life. Hands down the most disturbing scene that I've ever read in horror. Now, maybe it might be topped, but I have a good feeling it's going to be top 5 scariest things I've ever read. So Nathan Ballengard, cheers to you, my friend. You definitely deserve a spot on this list. Those are my 4 scariest moments from horror novels. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I don't want to drag it on for too long, but those are just some of my thoughts about the scariest scenes I've read. Again, this is going to be a series. I'm going to be making more videos where I updated it. Let me know if you think these scenes sound scary. Have you read any of these stories? Have you experienced them? If not, I recommend you go check them all out. Go enjoy all the different stories that I said in here, the books I said in here, and experience those moments for yourself naturally by reading the story. And if you have some of your own scariest moments from horror books that you want to mention down below, feel free to bring it down in the comments. I would love to read them. I would love to then add them to my TBR and check them out eventually if I have not, or they might be on my TBR already, and I'm going to be looking forward to those. So that's all I have for today. Hope you guys enjoyed. And yeah, make sure to hit that subscribe button and hit that like button if you liked the video. And that's all I have for today. Deuces.